Greetings! Good evening. Welcome to the gutter. Nobody ever expects the Chili Dilly pickle advertisement. So this is the gutter. Everybody ends up here eventually. I am Aldous, and I will be your host this evening. And joining me on this digital information highway that is carrying us to your ear, the ever humble and always magnanimous poker champion, renowned internet restaurant reviewer, and champion of rhetoric few could ever hope to rival, JP. JP, thank you for joining me yet again.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm still reeling from the Chili Dilly. I was definitely not seeing. I was not expecting that.
Served in a sack. Served in a sack. You can't make it up. It was a simpler time. Let's greet the chat. See what we got here this evening. We got Dean. This man is forever missed. Never forget what they've done to our boy. Oh, trust me, Dean. We will touch on that. Probably more than slightly tonight. Arrogant Ape has decided to join us against probably his wife's better judgment. Looking forward to another banger. Thank you, sir. Looking forward to having you in the chat. Snuggy! Great to see you, sir. Mo Biggs, classing up the joint. Thanks, Mo. Appreciate seeing you, man. We got Belmont Press. Great to see you as well, sir. Snuggy's liking the pickle advertisement. Matt Barr. Sup, y'all? Hail CG. Good to see you, Matt. Rick Saylor. What's up, bitches? What's up, Rick? Great to see you. Some person. Great to see you, man. Burn him. Oh, I mean, hello. Thank you. That's what I like about our chat, is it's warm and welcoming, and there's no hostility at all. Did that say no fuss, no musk? I don't know, man. I can't get past it without bursting out laughing. I don't think I've made it through the whole thing yet. Matthew Fowler, the unfiltered one himself. Great to see Maddie in the chat. And everybody else is just saying hello to each other. So, yeah, great to see you, man. Good to have everybody here. So, JP, you asked me, man, months ago, if I could recommend some books for you. And I think this is one of the first three I recommended. I have fond recollections of reading this. I consider it a beautiful masterpiece. What was your initial takeaway? Just real superficial.
I think we kind of jokingly used the term stunning and brave. That's what I unironically found this book to be. Now, I've always been a sucker for comic books that unexpectedly hit you in the life. And that's really what this book did for me. I was just kind of reeling, you know what I mean? Like it lulls you into, a false sense of security that you're just reading another comic book. And then all of a sudden, man, it's just like life. You know what I mean? It just happens and just punches you right in the stomach.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, death is, death is finite. It is the terminus est between two parallel worlds of existences or dimensions, depending on, I guess, whatever your state of being or philosophy is. But when it comes to comics, death usually has more in common with the storylines of retirement or exile in professional wrestling than they do with our traditional meat space understanding and comprehension of the affair. And I guess in so much as they never last. There's a big promotion in the lead up, a grand and really realistically often underwhelming story involving like a big last explosion of excitement for the character. And then they kind of just go softly out into the night until a few weeks later when they are reborn, cloned, brought back, time travel, dimension rip, however it wants to be done. You had the death of Superman and the breaking of the bat in kind of that Sturm und Drang of that went along with all of the 90s, and probably are most well known for everybody. And then I think those are probably the best examples off the top of my head of kind of that atmosphere that I'm describing. But tonight we are indeed discussing the rarity, the exception, and it's the asterisk to the rule that no one ever dies, because since this book, Captain Marvel has never returned in traditional form. He has remained dead. The death of Captain Marvel, in my opinion, all things considered, it has remained and echoes out today, even more so than it probably did when it was first released for this very reason. Written, penciled, and inked by Jim Starlin, covered by Steve Olaf, lettered by Jimmy Novak, edited by Al Milgram, And the big man himself, Jim Shooter, was EIC for this book. It's tonight we're talking about 1982's Marvel's first graphic novel, The Death of Captain Marvel. Now, there's, as JP and I were discussing in the back room before we went on the show, there are two versions of this book. There's the 1982 version that is around 48 to, I think, 52 pages or so, and it just covers this story. There is a second edition that carries with it, pasted in the front, basically, are two reference issues. The first of which is Captain Marvel number 34. I can't remember what the other one is because it's not as important as 34. The context of the story for what happens to Captain Marvel and why he's dying, Starlin went back to the September 1974 issue of Captain Marvel 34, and in this engagement with Nitro, there is a sequence where a bomb goes off and Captain Marvel is exposed to the gas that's in it and passes out. And then we have to flash forward 8 years later, and we find out that in addition to that exposure, the photons / radiation / whatever from the nega bands, which were the wristbands that gave him his power, has mutated the gas and its effects on his system into a terminal illness, the blackening. And so that's what the book covers. I did want to kind of touch on something briefly, and mainly because my good friend Snuggy asked, which Captain Marvel are we talking about? So I thought it would be fun to kind of go through there. Which Captain Marvel did Jim Starlin, the progenitor of the cosmic epic in comic format, choose to give this beautiful swan song to? Or for that matter, how many fucking Captain Marvels have there actually been? Well, the first, or perhaps the second, the first after this book, was Monica Rambeau, and probably the only one that I would actually consider decent of all of those that we will be going through here. She was the second to hold the title Captain Marvel, which initially in the stories was a title that she resisted adopting. Her first appearance was in Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16 in 1982, shortly after the graphic novel that we are discussing tonight was released. It was written by Roger Stern and drawn by the notable John Romita Jr. Monica did end up eventually embracing the name and even led the Avengers for a notable, if not semi-forgettable run. She has since abandoned the moniker and gone on to any number of other names. I think she might be going by Photon again but I don't really read too much modern Marvel. The next one is Genis Vell, and he was the genetically engineered son of Marvel, who was Captain Marvel, and the scientist Elysius. He was introduced initially as Legacy in Silver Surfer Annual number 3 from 1993. We know it as a generally forgettable entry in a book that was written by the prolific, if underwhelmingly talented, Ron Mars, with some excellent art by Ron Lim that was unfortunately never matched with the writing. He attempted to carry on the legacy of Captain Marvel, even using the title himself after he acquired his father's nega bands. But because original ideas are lame and recycling storylines is the way of contemporary Marvel, he also had a full storyline where he essentially did the whole Rick Jones replacement thing in order to function in this reality in the same fashion that his father did. This will become an ongoing trend as we continue through all the Captain Marvels. The next one is Phyla Vell. This was created by, I'm not going to say writer, that's what he does, but I don't know if I'd call Peter David a writer. He's a guy that puts words together to form sentences. And artist Paul Azzetta. This is from 2004's Captain Marvel number 16, which is entirely forgettable, if not for the completely laughable version. This is the sister of Genis Vell. And kind of like how I said earlier, they just copy ideas and have no original ones. Yeah, Exhibit B, Your Honor, the prosecution rests. She was served as Captain Marvel briefly, and I can't remember why, but I'm guessing that it had something to do with the book being canceled because, well, Marvel. The next one, Kinnear. This one was actually not half bad. This was by writer Paul Jenkins and artist Tom Rainey. It was initially billed as Marvel's Return, But this was around 2006, the Civil War arc, and then that led up into 2008's rehash of Secret Invasion. See no creativity or original ideas. And it was revealed that he was just a Skrull sleeper agent, right down to the subject being brainwashed to make him think that he was actually Marvel. And the next one is Norval. This was originally Marvel Boy in a forgotten limited series by perennially billed and often underregarded Grant Morrison and artist J.G. Jones. Here he's a young Kree warrior from an alternate dimension because that's never been done before, and he's dedicated himself to killing Skrulls, which he's not even really that good at. He does become a Dark Avenger in the storyline before it was canceled, joining Norman Osborn, but then immediately quit because he found out Norman was evil, because the title of Dark Avengers wasn't a clue enough for him. He later goes on to join the Young Avengers and came out as bisexual because see Marvel again. So, with all of that being said, we get to the last one. Carol Danvers. Now, the modern take on Carol Danvers, I'm not leaving this up. I can't leave that up. So, she's the current Captain Marvel. And, you know, in my research today for this, there are so many damn books and reboots and cancellations and story shifts that I'm not even going to talk about that. Carol Danvers was originally introduced by the highly respected and talented Roy Thomas and artist Gene Colan in 1968 Marvel's Superheroes number 13. She is far and away a better character then than she has ever been now. It's one of those weird moments where the more that's been written about the character in each preceding year, the character becomes more and more worthless. I'm going to put that picture back up again. There's an exclamation point on that. But we're not talking tonight about any of those Captain Marvels that Marvel has thrown wildly out into the published world and attempted to get something to stick. No, we are talking about the one, the only, Marvel. And this was created by artist Gene Colan and Stan Lee, which means Gene probably did all the heavy lifting, and or there is someone out there who did all the work and Stan just took credit for it. Marvel is a Kree warrior who is empowered as a cosmic guardian of the universe, and he's given the weapons known as negabands, which you can see one on his wrist right there. So with that little bit of background noise all covered, let's check the chat. We've got Gingerton saying hey to Corey Barton, which means Corey Barton is in the chat. Great to see Corey, always. Hicks Villain has shown up. Great to see Hicks Villain. Chat's moving on me here, so I apologize. I'm trying to keep up. Some person saying, I'm guessing they're bringing her back to life. Yeah, that's a pretty good guess, man. See, Quiet Red Media's here. Hello! Hey, great to see you, man. So, and then Breeze enhancements have really helped me. Appreciate her, Rick. And, well, she's got two assets. I don't think they're that great, but
can you put the picture? Can you put the picture back up?
Do I have to?
Yeah. I mean, doesn't that just scream? My parents have a vineyard in Napa Valley.
Ooh, that's a good one, man. If you saw her walking down a dark alley, would you turn around? I'd be kind of scared, personally.
No, I'm not messing with that Pinot Grigio.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a chick that knows her rosé. All right, with that being said, so those are all the Captain Marvels. So what is it about this book that's so worthy of our time, other than, okay, a character dies, and he's stayed dead for 40 plus years? Why is it important? Well, first, I think the editor himself put it best when he said, and this is in the preamble, the preface for the actual graphic novel. In introduction, little needed to be said of Captain Marvel. His life having been spent playing the role of warrior. When he realizes the limitations inherent in such a life, he showed the greatest courage in his warrior's heart, the courage to change, and he sought a path of peace. It was a path circumstances seldom allowed him to follow, but the desire was there. Let us hope that where his path now leads him, he will last find peace. I thank Jim Starlin, perhaps the man closest associated with our Kree captain, for his extraordinary portrayal of Marvel's adventures, including this, his last. So I think that to me is incredibly touching, that the editor would speak so kindly of it. But before we get into this, JP, do you have any overarching comments you want to dig out?
I do, but I don't want to I don't want to spoil anything, or not spoil anything, but like, jump ahead into it. But I have a lot of questions because comic history is kind of a weak area for me. But the first question I had that I'm really interested if you can illuminate on is, what was the reception when this came out? Like, I was 2 years old, so.
Yeah, and same here. I honestly don't know. It's not something I've talked with many of the elders, I guess, that I've run into that were of cognitive age or of sorts when this was dropped. I can tell you that by the time I picked it up in the late 80s, it was really highly regarded and really hard to find a copy. Everybody spoke highly of it, but nobody wanted to sell it. So, I mean, it was certainly one of those things when you see that, when people are talking about stuff, but you don't want to move copies, kind of tells you that, it's an impactful book, and B, that there's something to be said for positive reaction. I guess just kind of moving a little bit into the book itself, it starts off. The best way to say it is that it's a pedestrian entry into this. 'Cause when you look at all of Starlin's stuff, and Starlin far and away is the progenitor of the cosmic Marvel storylines. He's the guy. He's Adam Warlock. He's Thanos. He's the Infinity Gauntlet. He's all of that, and he kind of just does it single-handedly. And a lot of his stuff will have these intricate lead-ins to these very complex multi-arc stories, and that's not the case here. It's a real pedestrian entry, and Marvel is just dictating his thoughts for posterity. He knows he's going to die, and he starts off kind of when he was just a Kree warrior. And if you're asking why he's not blue, there are two kinds of Kree. There's the blue Kree, and there's the pink Kree. He's a pink Kree. So, and the pink Krees look like us, look like people. So that's why he's that way. But anyways, so he goes through his history, and at first you're not really sure why. He is semi-retired at this point canonically, and I also think it's important to kind of put an asterisk on this. We've experienced the third tier hero kind of coming to mainline prominence with Iron Man in the movies, and that's kind of regained cultural awareness, I guess, of that. But at this time, Captain Marvel's he's a third-rate hero. He's not the kind of guy that everybody's clamoring to read the stories on, but he crossed over a lot, and he was always involved in a lot of these arcs and stories, and because he's this cosmic guardian. And so to start it off this way isn't unusual for the context of the character, because you know what's been going on, and you know that he's been semi-retired. He hasn't been as active as much. But then he starts going into kind of what's going on. And there's this Thanos at this point has been petrified, essentially. He's still, quote-unquote, alive, but he's been petrified on his ship. Mentor, who is Thanos' father and kind of Captain Marvel's adopted father, from Titan, they venture off and they fight the sons of Thanos, and they find out that Captain Marvel's not doing so well. While he joins in the fight, he has this coughing fit, and Mentor asks him kind of what's going on. He says, "Well, I'm dying," and so they take him back to Titan. They plug him into all these machines, and they find out that yes, he's dying, and there's absolutely nothing you can do. He's 3 months to live. And so Mentor talks to him, and he says, "Well, have you talked to your, Elysia, your girlfriend, the love of his life?" And this is a panel, I think it's probably the most stirring panel in the book. And when you talk about like cinematic or understanding scene selection, you have to be very careful, in my opinion, when you're talking about film and comics, because they're two totally separate mediums. In comics, the action happens between the panels. In a film, the action happens on the screen, obviously, but your cuts are usually made to accentuate emotion, not action. But at the same point, Spielberg and Coppola often will linger on a conversation from an outside perspective angle. And so when I talk about that, I mean the best example of that is Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation from I think 1972 with Gene Hackman. In that you hear a lot of the conversation of the people with Hackman, and it's Hackman's face, and you're seeing the emotion on his face in response to the conversation he's listening to via the bug in that instance. How Starlin handles that in this instance is interspersed panels that show you via Mentor's reaction how he's responding to the conversation that he's watching occurring as Captain Marvel tells Elysia that he's dying. And I think this is absolutely stunning. I think it's brilliant. You don't see this kind of work. I did not remove any dialogue bubbles from this. This is as it is in the book. There is no dialogue because no dialogue is needed because less is more. And I think there's more than this that you can take away from this book. But one thing that I do want to bring up before I open it up for discussion here, JP, if you notice as we're going through the panels that you see a lot of shallow inking, or not, like Starlin's kind of known for doing these really beautiful long ink lines of varying weight, and you're not going to see that anywhere in this book. And that's because part of almost initially at start of this book, Jim Starlin dislocated a finger. And in order to adapt his inking style to his time constraint, he had to shorten all of his lines. So he uses a much more constrained style here. And it's one of those happy accidents of fate, as I guess Bob Ross would say, that it works so well with this because the style is just a little off-center from what you'd expect from Starlin. And it fits because so many of Starlin's stories are this grand, epic, heroic journey. And the style here is just a little bit different, and the tone is vastly different. So I think that's a great thing to go through. It's also worth mentioning that this is a story of death and coping with the understanding and realities of it. And while he was writing and drawing this, Jim Starlin's own father was dying of cancer. So it certainly is a personal story in more than one way. So I guess, JP, comments on that?
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of answered, what was going to be one of my questions was how this related to Starlin. I didn't look into it at all, but that explains a lot. And you had mentioned the softer lines, and I think the softer colors here as well. The red isn't as sharp. The brown everything feels almost like the scene itself is melting a little bit. That just kind of a gentler blue than you saw on the previous page.
No, for sure. It's definitely a more muted palette, and you can even see it in this. And Marvel, as he's both accepting his fate and coming to terms with it, he's thinking back of all the foes that he has faced. And now, one thing, and this has always bugged me ever since I was a kid, I get why everybody is included in this, because at one time or another he's fought them, except for the Watcher. I don't understand why the Watcher's in it. That's always bugged me. But and then there's as he's dealing with that and stuff, he goes and he talks to the previously mentioned Rick Jones, and Rick and Captain Marvel shared there's a whole multiple storylines of how they interacted, but I mean, end of the day, they were really good friends. And he's explaining to Rick that he's got, as he says in panel 2, I've got cancer, Rick, and it's inoperable. I have less than 4 months to live. And Rick says, cancer, it can't be, but it is. That's why I want you to get this checkup. I don't think our symbiotic relationship would allow the disease to be passed on to you, but we shouldn't take any chances. So this is, again, even as he's dying, he's still focused on being that heroic. And this is an undercurrent that goes throughout all of it. And it's something that Starlin took a great deal of care with the character, any heroic character that he writes. You'll see these moments of empathetic compassion that are interspersed with heroic action, implying that the hero is not just an action-oriented individual. There has to be those quiet moments where you see the morality and the ethics come out, that a hero is not just the guy that jumps on the grenade. It's why he jumps on the grenade. It's the ethos that's built into his spirit that makes him the hero, that causes him to do the action. And Starlin is absolutely brilliant. and how he lays that out and presents it. The other thing that he's absolutely brilliant on is panel layout. Some of these, as we're going through, you talk about, how do you do a montage in comic book form? Well, ladies and gentlemen, Exhibit A. This is absolutely stunning work, from the side profile of Thanos to the cube to just everything in between. It's absolutely beautiful, and the line work, time and again throughout this book, is just absolutely stunning. I can't compliment it enough. Starlin's, and he doesn't need my compliments. Everybody knows that Starlin is heads and tails above most of his contemporaries, and especially when you talk about space scenes. So, so with all that, he's going through. He's telling everybody. All of his friends find out, and they're Earth. He's a hero. He knows all the Avengers. He knows the Fantastic Four. He knows the X-Men. So everybody gets together, and they're like, well, they all go to Titan, and they're like, well, we can fix this. We've got to be able to fix this. And the greatest minds begin to work on it. And the Kree already have a cure for it, because the Kree call this the blackening. The problem, as they come across, is they can fix it, but it's not just any blackening. And as I mentioned earlier, the nerve agent from Nitro, way back in that September 1974 issue of Captain Marvel, merged with the photons / radiation of the negabands that gave Captain Marvel his power at the time, and have mutated it. And they're unable to cure him. And so he's terminal. There's nothing they can do. The greatest minds that are known have no solutions. They can solve galactic problems. They can defeat terrible supervillains, but they can't simply cure an incurable disease, which is probably, I think, one of the most gut-wrenching moments of this, because you really get this sense that's like, all the power. It's that Superman scene that Donner did so perfectly well when Pa Kent dies, and he says, all my powers, and I couldn't save him. There's nothing I could do. It's that. You're watching that in comic book form, and it's exquisitely done. It's a real emotion puller. So, any compliments on that at all? Or,
I mean, they kind of take a step back. You had said something about, all the superheroes coming together to try and cure cancer, and like I had mentioned at the beginning about like the bravery of the story, like just thinking about that in a metatextual way, where you're kind of kicking down that door between, lighthearted fantasy and like, entertainment, and you're actually addressing in the book, like, yeah, why don't all of these super scientists just kind of cure cancer? And so actually like pulling that, like the book kind of drags it into the light, something that you would think the story would want to shy away from. It has the courage to go, okay, let's have this conversation in the middle of this really, really serious book. That just kind of blew my mind.
Right. No, for sure. And so you've got this amalgam of some of the greatest minds. Mentor from Titan, Thanos' father, is there. Doctor Strange, Reed Richards, Thor, Beast. They're no match for this disease. There's nothing they can do. And so friends, former allies, even enemies are come to Titan to talk to Marvel and give their condolences and say their last words. And I think one of the other most moving panels in this, that again shows just excellent writing, is when the Thing and Spider-Man go to talk to Marvel. And there's an understanding here that's often lost when writing Spider-Man, and that's that Spider-Man is a kid. He's not a mature adult. And Spider-Man's resulting way of handling Marvel's death is to leave. He walks away. And what makes it even more powerful here, in addition to just Spider-Man being a scared kid, under that costume, he's still just a scared kid, and he's trying to deal with it in the way that he knows best, is there's a beautiful symmetry here, because there is a Marvel team-up issue where Spider-Man and the Thing fight with Marvel. So there's some history here, and I think that's probably why Starlin chose to do it this way, is that much like we talked about in the Justice Society episode with John Byrne, having a deep understanding of the characters and the history and the lore and respecting it and how he went forward and wrote and corrected things that were problems. This is Starlin understanding that this is a light callback. And you'll notice that there is no editor's note on this to cite that callback. And there's no editor's notes throughout this entire graphic novel. They don't do the cutesy Marvel thing where like, oh, look back to issue number 42, Excelsior. That's not done. It's a high-tech book.
If you want to see this guy get cancer, be sure to pick up issue.
Right, exactly. And, part of that's Shooter with the higher maturity level. And, part of it's just the understanding that Starlin's writing something here it's a generational story. It's something pretty powerful, and we don't need to keep that kitsch in that we do in the monthlies. So as Marvel goes through and he's passing, there's nothing they can do, and so all the heroes gather. And what you get are some of the best panels in the book. Again, in my opinion, they just use this beautiful blue to highlight the shadow and really just accentuate the solemn nature of everything. And as he drifts away, Thanos awakes, and Thanos arises, and he meets Thanos, and Thanos is talking to him on his bedside. And Thanos reaches out a hand, and he pulls him out of bed, and he's wearing his costume all of a sudden. And instead of letting Captain Marvel die in his bed, they're going to give him one last fight in his mind so that he can die a hero. And it's this beautiful, modern, if you've watched a lot of movies, immediately when I say something like that, you're probably going to think like, oh, that's Big Fish, to the movie Big Fish, where you get to die your death and how you want to do it. No, it's a little bit more important than that. This is Death and Thanos, two of his mortal enemies, agreeing to help him. And shortly before this, even, Captain Marvel fought the Skrulls his entire life. That was as a Kree, he defended the Earth. He fought multiple Skrulls, and that was something that he constantly was. They were one of his vicious enemies. But they show up at his deathbed and present him with the Skrull Imperial Medal of Honor because he was such a worthy opponent. They have nothing but respect for him, and they don't want to see him. They want to see him fall in battle. They don't want to see him fallen by such a disease. And again, it's just these poignant moments of honor and respect and reverence, all handled in a very adult manner and all handled in a very artful manner in a book that's drawn exquisitely well. Any thoughts on that part? Anything you want to add before we move into the end portion here?
Yeah, no, I think I told you this immediately after I finished reading it, but man, I thought that I had really done something in Eudaimonia 2, which has a very similar ending, where one of the characters basically gets to live out their entire life perfectly, and then slowly, like, the curtain begins to fall that he's really dying, and that's just the veil kind of, reassuring the body in the moment of its crisis. So yeah, I thought I was a real smart cookie with that, and then I read this and I was like, crap, nothing's original.
Well, there's original takes. Certainly nobody had ever done anything like this prior to the death of Captain Marvel by Starlin. And there's still, I'm sure, thousands of ways you could tell a story like this that haven't been done before. But there's something special about the way that Starlin has framed this and handled it, because as he and Thanos begin to battle in this spiritual realm, however you want to put it, and Thanos brings forth enemies and foes that Captain Marvel has fought, and he vanquishes them all until he kind of just stops fighting Thanos and realizes that, he's ready. And there's this, that I love the bottom four panels are just absolutely exquisite in how they handle it, because up until now, Death has always presented herself as a very beautiful woman. And he kind of stops and realizes, like, I don't never need that. I can see you for who you are. And so you get that great hand motion, and he just wipes away her face, and she becomes death. And as he does that, and as they take hands with Thanos, he flatlines, and Captain Marvel passes. And the last page of the book is this absolutely epic memorial, and it just puts that exclamation point on it. Now, earlier I had talked about, they've tried to reboot this character multiple times and it doesn't take. And I think there's multiple reasons for that. One is, when you write a story that's this well put together, that's this well, it touches something in your soul when you read it. You can't ever try to one-up that. It's touching this character is verboten. Nobody's ever going to be able to do what Jim did with this character ever again. And at the same time, there's the fear of cancer killing a hero, even a mutated form of Kree cancer, which is, again, the blackening. There's something intrinsically scary about that, because that means it can take anybody. If it can take Captain Marvel, who can it take? And that hits that lizard brain portion about that fear. And, there's no fight or flight away from that kind of a foe. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant that a man who has taken on Thanos, the Titan, and, fought across the galaxy and faced every villain that he could possibly face and been in and out of situations that would have killed a lesser man. It's something as simple as a mutated form of cancer that takes him down. And it humbles the hero, but at the same time, it doesn't humble his acts. And I think that's the lasting legacy of this, is that you don't see anybody take a hero with reverence like this. If the death of Superman would have been handled with half of this reverence, I think it would have been much more culturally impactful beyond just a sales technique. This book is, in my opinion, it should be studied by anybody writing cape shit, because this is what makes cape shit engaging. This is a hero in every fashion of the word. And I know you've taken your hand currently at doing some quote unquote superhero stuff. Do you find that to be true? Do you think there's something intrinsic or something buried within this that's different, that makes it stand out from everything else with regards to the hero?
Well, I mean, I think you touched on it earlier. I had mentioned that I was curious to know more about Starlin's, what he was going through, and I didn't look into it. And you mentioned that his father was dying, of cancer. And I mean, I think for for many people, that is the original hero, right? Like your old man. And the question that's been kind of burning through me this whole time is, I'm wondering, like, how much when you see like Spider-Man running out of the room and the conversations between him and Rick, it makes me wonder, like, how much of that was the writer saying the things that he was thinking and wanted to say, but knew it would be inappropriate. You know what I mean? So how much of this was a vessel for somebody going through it, or maybe right after they had gone through this experience? And to kind of answer your question about it being intrinsic, something that you've said that really stuck with me, or you were quoting somebody, was the importance of letting your heroes die.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. Heroes need to die. They need to have a sunset.
Yeah.
If you don't, and it's not that everybody today likes to quote the line from The Dark Knight, right? You either live long enough to be the hero, or whatever. I can't remember the phrasing, but or you live to be the hero, die early enough to be the hero, or you live long enough to be the villain. However you phrase that, that's wrong. It works great in that context, but that's not the way it is. Right. Heroes need to fade into obscurity, and new heroes need to rise. if we were still talking about Zorro now, Zorro would not have the cultural impact that he has, because you can only iron and wash that shirt so many times before it becomes threadbare.
If they don't have an ending, what is any of it for?
Exactly. Every character needs to have a beginning, a middle, and a close. And however that close is handled is up to the complete other, the author or the creator or, whoever's writing that story. But that needs to be there. You need to have the bookends. And without the bookends, the middle doesn't mean anything because it just goes on forever. Again, citations, Superman, Batman, Flash, all these characters have gone on for too long. But when you talk about, cultural relevance and all that, they're still impactful, but they're meaning less and less and less, and the stories are getting thinner and thinner and thinner because they're not having the same effect. And that's why they need to die. So at least I hope that answers your question in the sense of where I was coming from when I said that.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that some people might have is like, hey, Aldous, you said that this is Marvel's first graphic novel from 1982. What the hell happened? So that actually goes all the way back to 1971 when Jack Kirby leaves Marvel and goes over to DC to do New Gods. Kirby's pitch to Goodman when he went to DC when he went over to DC and left Goodman and Stan behind was, I've got this great story and it's going to be, I want to do European style books that are quarterlies that are oversized. And DC went, no, Jack, you're doing floppies. And Jack kept on talking about it the whole time he was at DC. And he comes back to Marvel and he's talking about it more, that he thinks this is the future. And Shooter listened to him. And Shooter had this idea that he's like, yeah, I like that. I think we're going to do that. So by 78, 77, Shooter's really looking into it. And Marvel actually forms a division. And they're going to do graphic novels. And the entire just thrust of this is to mimic what's going on in France and Belgium and Germany with the bande dessinée style, what became I don't even know if they were bande dessinées at this time, but that was what they were trying to do. They're trying to mimic these beautiful oversized books. Because at the time, Mobius is actually, and Goulet are absolutely killing it in France with everything. So they're going to give these beautiful things. So they start rolling it out, and as soon as Marvel does it, DC copies it. And you don't see anything done with it until 1982, when they released The Death of Captain Marvel. The following year, DC would release The Star Raiders, which is their first graphic novel that they released. We'll probably end up going over that at some point. That's worth at least a 45-minute discussion. But Marvel would then go on to release, Elric, The Dreaming City, Dreadstar by Jim Starlin. The New Mutants started off as a graphic novel in this series before it ever became a comic book run. Probably the most famous, or at least the most well-known Marvel graphic novel of this series is 1982's X-Men, God Loves, Man Kills. Star Slammers by Simonson was part of this. Kill Raven, Void Indigo, fucking Shooter and his Dazzler fixation that came out in 84. Swords and the Swashbucklers by Mantlo was part of this. It goes on and on and on. For a couple of years, and then it just kind of stops. And then graphic novels as we know them, which are collections of arcs, and then omnibuses start being released. And, essentially, they were still arguably being released into the 2000s out of this label, but it's pretty much over as about the mid-90s. You don't see too much more of the Marvel graphic novel, quote-unquote, style. So I guess from the chat... New Mutants sounds like a band name. Yeah, dude, I was never into New Mutants. I just didn't get it. And Brian's here. He's letting us know that I just ate half of pulled pork.
All pulled pork?
I want another half pound. I think he means a half pound and not
Got
half
it.
of
Okay.
pulled pork. So he's a writer, ladies and gentlemen. Brian the writer. So yeah, I think that's it. I guess, final thoughts. I kind of feel like I dominated the discussion here. Just kind of
no. Actually, I need more. Actually, I need to know. I was just curious. Do you have any opinions on? Wow, that's great. It wouldn't be a show without a motorcycle buzzing on by.
Every show, man.
Do you have any opinions on, the whole, the cosmicking of, comic book universes, and, whether or not that feeds into the inevitable, multi-dimension thing?
Ugh. I think it depends. When you're talking about like what Starlin did, I'm not the biggest Adam Warlock fan, but I think Thanos is Darkseid with depth. Darkseid's a much better character. Thanos has better stories and a better. He's better engaged within the worlds that Starlin put him in. But when you're talking about like a story like this, I always thought Starlin handled the cosmic aspects. He made it somehow smaller. You still had this grand sense, but the stories felt niche and narrowed and focused instead of a lot of times, especially with New Gods and a lot of the attempts to fix quote unquote New Gods, no matter who was helming it, it just becomes too much and it's too big and you're losing that central focus. And I think what this book really shows is Starlin's ability to really laser focus in on just one thing. And there's stuff going on all around him everywhere. You've got Skrulls, you've got the Kree, you've got Earth, you've got Titan. You've got everything going on with his relationship with Mentor. You've got everything going on with his relationship with his friends, with Rick, with Elysia. But at the same and everything internalizing. He's internalizing all this.
Right.
But that's, again, it's all focused and it moves. You never get lost. It's not a maze. You don't have to ask questions of like, well, how did we get here? It flows like a river straight through to to the end as it releases into the sea and Captain Marvel passes. And then I think just to end it on that note and just show the memorial, to go from, Mentor pulling the sheet over his head in that last panel and then go right to the memorial. That's a nice curtain call. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to show the funeral. You don't need to have the man with the umbrella that's got a tear, that's distant from everybody else because he can't be a part. You don't need that. You just end on that moment and then show the memorial and then boom, move on. And then you can take that story anywhere else. But if you mess with that, if you take that poignant moment and then try to drag it out, it ruins the book. Because again, you need that curtain call. The hero needs that end. That's the period for his career. And I think you need to show it just as much respect as you do the hero in any other story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a shame that he didn't have a giant afro and a pink leotard.
There you go. Cops coming out with anti-Brie takes. Oh, Snuggie wants to see more Brie. That's what Snuggie wants. He wants more Brie. That's Captain Marvel. Yeah. So that's something else. For all of you that don't read comics or have never read comics, when Captain Marvel came out, a lot of people were like, well, why are you so upset? Why does it matter? It matters because this was Captain Marvel. This right here, this moment, that's his swan song. Everything's over. And it doesn't matter if it's Monica or Genisval or Falval or Kinnear or Norval or Bree. None of them, not one, will ever have a moment that's nearly as powerful as that Marvel got. And there's nothing more awesome than that. That again, Starlin wrote something that was so powerful that a film franchise couldn't even rejuvenate life into this character. Now, part of that is the writing, for sure. But I also think part of it is the legacy of what Starlin did with him. I prefer when they drag it on until I hate it. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That has been done, Rick, to so many of our wonderful, wonderful comic runs. But ladies and gentlemen of the chat, unless you guys have any questions for us, I think we're going to close it out right there. Unless, JP, do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Go back How to Die 2 on Kickstarter if you haven't. It's an uphill climb, but I'm going to be out here scraping and scrapping. I've gotten, so far about half of my backers are actually new readers, so in that regard, it's been a success. So yeah, go and get it if you want to. If you like, really depressing stories where people die and then they don't.
Fantastic. Glad to hear it's doing well, man. Now, that being said, I would like to say this to the remaining members of the chat as they slowly dwindle away, if they haven't already been driven away by our exposition on this wonderful topic. If there is a book, a run, a series, or a topic that you would like JP and I to address, read, and then discuss, or just bring up randomly out of the blue, comment, drop us a link, drop us a DM, let us know on Twitter. We'd be happy to cover it. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. This has been The Gutter.
This is blood for blood and by the gallons. This is the old days and the bad days, the all or nothing days. They're back. There's no choices left.
Try some new Minute Maid orange tangerine. It's got calcium.
Then I'm not drinking it.
Oh, no, it's sweet. You'll like it.
I don't believe you.
Well, then who would you believe?
I don't know, Robert Loggia. Whoa, Robert Loggia.
Billy, your mother's right. New Minute Maid orange tangerine tastes great. And it's got as much calcium as milk.
If you say so, Mr. Loggia.
Yeah.
This is great.
Enjoy your breakfast.
New Minute Maid.
You're still here? It's over. Go home.